Hello, everyone. This is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidle.
And I'm Cristine Seidell.
Okay. And we are here to talk about the ego and intuition. We have a lot to discuss here, Cristine. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to you and let you run to give us the insight on what is intuition, the difference between intuition and instinct, and how we can use it. And then we'll continue our conversation.
Absolutely. I love this. I love this topic because I feel like intuition is something that we're all kind of constantly aware of. It's constantly talking to us, but it's also constantly talking to us alongside with our ego. So, if you ever, are just kind of sitting around and you're kind of pulling yourself within, you will hear that internal conversation between your intuition and your ego. And intuition really is just kind of coming back to true self. Intuition is a sense of knowing. And, when we talk about sensing, we've kind of come out in the last, few years about highly sensitive people is really where we've talked about people sensing things. And, when we talk about sensing, of course, we think about the five senses, but what they're really, learning about is that there really is like the sixth sense, which is our intuition. And some people have a very high level of intuition, and those are what they're calling highly sensitive people. But this sensing is almost like a superpower, and every single one of us has an intuition. Some of us are a little bit more acute into it than others, but it is a sense of knowing, almost like a truth statement that is talking to us, an internal GPS system, so to speak. And that intuition is really just kind of telling us truth about something, someone, some situation, that there is more than what is being seen on the basic level, so to speak, on the level of what we're used to trusting, like our five senses. There's something else beyond that. And that is what intuition is picking up on, is that sensing. So anything you think, that your definition of intuition has kind of brought about when we started talking about the ego and intuition?
No, I think that definition is so good. And I love that you said that everyone has access to this. I think so often we hear about intuitives. Yes. And these are people who work in the field of intuition. And that could be the clairs, clairvoyant, clairsentient, the other clairs. And then we also have the people who claim to be intuitives.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And, and a lot of times that's actually a very strong ego at play. Yes. And we can use our intuition to differentiate between the authentic,
yes,
and the posers, if you will.
Yes. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we also, I would love to talk with you. I think the confusion a lot of people have about intuition is they don't really know the difference between instinct and intuition. And it really does cause a lot of confusion because there is some overlap between the two. So can you talk a little bit about how to differentiate and where those overlaps are?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the overlaps is really about sensing. It is a sense above what we're used to leaning into as far as, processing information and making decisions. That typically is just like, what we're seeing on this, visceral level, on this external level. Instinct and intuition are a sensing of something beyond that level. And yes, everybody can tap into their intuition. There are people who are gifted with higher levels of intuition on the spectrum of intuition, and those would be people like empaths, people who are highly intuitive, clairvoyant. We talk about professions that you really do have to have a high intuition, such as like medicine, therapy, teaching, where you're sensing, how people are, what's beyond the surface, right? So a doctor might say, hey, we've run these panel of tests, everything looks okay, but I'm really feeling like we need to go and run these other tests because there's just something intuitively that's coming about. So, intuition and instinct both really do meet in that level of sensing something else. Where intuition is a sense of knowing, it's kind of it's kind of this longer pulse or a longer conversation internally. It's kind of scanning and kind of being like, what more do I need to be aware of? What is it that I need to sit with a little bit longer on this? So that's intuition. Instinct is a little bit more of a quicker pulse. Instinct is more along the lines of a protective measure. So it's kind of saying, what do I need to be alert to or aware of right now? So people will say, I need to go with my gut instinct. That typically means that when something occurs, they know right away, I need to go with this, right? Or they're kind of scanning for, what is the safety of something in this situation? What does my instinct tell me? And that's for a more protective measure. My gut instinct is telling me not to take this job because, I see the financial market right now. So that was the first thing I felt. So I'm going to go with my gut instinct. So you can see that instinct is still that sensing of something, but it's sensing from more of a protective, what do I need to be alert to, or what do I need to be aware of in terms of keeping me safe and keeping me protected. Where intuition is more of this internal conversation almost of what is it that I need to know or be mindful of or listen to in order to hear the truth. So you can see that one is more of a quick pulse, one is more of a longer kind of pulse that is looking and listening more to what is being unseen at that moment so that truth can be spoken.
I love the way that you just described that, because instinct is that immediate. I don't feel safe right now in the situation. I'm going to remove myself from it. And then your intuition, when you are out, remove yourself from a threat, and then you get into a safe space, then you can get still and really listen to that intuition. What was my intuition telling me there? I instinctively knew I needed to go.
Yes.
My intuition will later let you know, one, it will validate.
Yes.
And usually, in my case, I would say, 98% of the time I'm spot on.
Yeah.
Anytime that I don't listen to it, it gets heightened.
Yeah. Yes.
And then my intuition really has to start taking over.
Yes.
Where I start feeling physical reactions to it. Maybe I start feeling anxiety, and that's where more of the intuition comes in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I do feel that, so much of our conditioning has been to not listen to our intuition, just as much as our intuition is such a part of the conversation we have internally. Like I said earlier, the ego is as well. And so, they sometimes grapple with each other, especially before we've done some more of that, inner child work, or some more of that, true self, reconnection. So I think that, intuition is something that people are always saying, hey, trust your intuition, it will never steer you wrong. And the more you actually work on fine tuning your intuition, the more that statement is, yes, 100% true, but you have to know the voice of your intuition, and you have to know the voice of your ego, really. And instinct and intuition, sometimes some people, could be highly intuitive, but instinctively still struggle with that, because that's more of that quick response, right? And so you might withdraw and be like, hey, I thought my instinct was saying this, but then when I was sitting with my intuition, now that I'm, kind of processing through this, I can see where I let my instinct say something really from my ego, and my intuition was quietly trying to speak otherwise. So, really being able to work with those two and understand that some people have very high levels of giftedness and instinct and not so much on intuition. And some people might be highly, high on the spectrum of intuition, but instinct they're not as quick with reacting to what that intuition is saying.
Let me ask you, so I think what you said about being able to really listen and feel your intuition. I think we have, for those who are more cognitively focused, right? That's how they define the world as cognitive. A good way to, in my opinion, a good way to know your intuition is, and if you want to call it pattern recognition, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. You can call it that. Knock yourself out. Okay, for those of us who are more in our bodies, we feel it there. Now, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll respond. How do you know your intuition? Like, what is the voice or the feeling or the sound of your Cristine's intuition?
Yeah. It's funny because I am very much a head-centered person. I'm very defined in my head, which means, I take in and I process a lot of information. And so I can get very stuck in my head. I can overthink things. I can perseverate on things. And so, but I also am a very highly intuitive person too. And so, it took me a long time to really kind of figure out how to lead from more of my intuition rather than my head, and just let my head be the place of bringing that stuff to my intuition. Hey, these are the things to be aware of, and check in with your intuition. So my intuition is actually just very calm but very clear. And, it loves wait time. And I don't know if that was something that just kind of was developed from when I was a teacher, and we really had to learn how to allow our students to sit with the information before we prodded them for questions, or if it was the continuation of that, becoming a therapist and learning how to sit with people in some quietness and silence so that they could process. That's really how I've learned how to sit with my own intuition, is allow it to settle almost and ground itself. And then let it, as soon as it's speaking in a very calm and a very clear voice, then I know that is my intuition speaking. I might get a response right away to something, but for me to trust it, I have to give it that wait time, so to speak, and know that the intuition, if it's screaming at me, it's probably screaming at me because there's a little bit of that ego that's in there too. Like if it's angry or frustrated, the intuition is still trying to say something, but it's not clear yet. And that clarity is where I know that that's truly my intuition. So, and again, I know that you're a highly intuitive person as well. So tell me a little bit about your intuition, and what does it sound like, and how have you gotten to the place of being able to really hear it?
I'm very similar in, I'm very cognitive. I love to think, and I love to explore ideas, and so I can really live inside my head. I know when my ego is active, when I'm trying to make decisions, when I say things like, that's not part of the plan. So my intuition is telling me to do something, and I don't want to do it because it's not part of the plan.
Right, exactly. This is not how it should be.
Exactly. So for me, it's very similar. It's the stillness. I get very calm. I have no emotional tie-in to anything that I'm either intuiting or about the next thing. I just know.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And, I've actually been in situations where I've removed myself. My instinct told me to remove myself from someone's presence. And my intuition was telling me, ooh, this was only going to get worse if I stayed.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And then someone close to me kept trying to get me to explain how I knew. And it was very disconcerting, because I was like, I don't know how I know. I just know.
Yeah.
And, and I also felt a little bit like I wasn't being believed. And then my ego kicked in, and I became very defensive.
Yeah.
And, in hindsight, I could have just been like, I just know. I just know,
Yeah.
but, our ego is, healed and unhealed
Right.
is
Right.
playing a part of it, and I think for me, being able to ask my ego to give me some spaciousness around it and
Absolutely.
just sit as I'm trying to come to the decision. I also find that anytime I have a laundry list
Yes.
of reasons of why I should do something, that is not my intuition.
Right. Yes.
That is my
Yes.
ego,
Yeah. Yeah.
kicking in, because my intuition doesn't need to defend.
No,
It
and I
just
think that,
knows.
it
Yeah.
just knows. And I think the more you do that intuitive, strengthening work, it goes hand in hand with the ego work, and, you know, as people, as children, actually, we were all extremely intuitive. We were always, sensing our environment and more to make sure we were safe and that we were loved, and some children that became even more intuitive, a lot of the people that we call empaths, they were using their intuition to cue into other people to see what was kind of needed in order, what was everybody else feeling in order to be able to process through, how to be, what do I need to feel from other people so I know what I need to be, so it was a way of keeping themselves safe. So the intuition was, for all of us, was highly active in childhood. The wounding occurred, in childhood as well, and the ego started trying to protect us, right, which is part of the intuition, and so the ego came in and was like, you don't have to be in control anymore. I will do everything for all of us, right? Our little commander came in and was like, no, you don't have to talk, I'll talk for you. You don't have to sense anything, I'll sense for you. You don't have to think, I'll think for you. And the ego, really trying to come in to protect us, really hushed and muted our intuition. And in doing so, we became very disconnected from it. But, we went into our mechanisms to get through this world, right? So the ego was doing what it was supposed to do, but our intuition got very muted. And in so many ways, we became even more disconnected from our true knowing, right? So ego, it, again, is neither good nor bad. It's just there to protect us. So, for people like the empaths, and I know we had this conversation when we had, Sarah on here, intuition was really there trying to cue into other people, and in a place that was really just from a very true spiritual place of our trueness and our connection to divine, and that's how powerful intuition really is it's really there to let us know the things we can't see, good or not so good, so, to send this back to you, I know that you're a, very spiritual person, very intuitive, so how do you feel like spirituality and intuition kind of come and marry in this world?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I do think that they are just beautiful partners, spirituality and intuition. You almost can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
And when I look at intuition through that spiritual lens, I see it as opportunities for growth and for self-actualization, enlightenment. We are all here to get better at being us. That's what we're here for, right? And I do believe so much of the time that we spend into our early adulthood and as we move into the middle years is healing those early life wounds, so that we can then transmute those to then be of service to others in the world.
Absolutely.
And so when we look at it that way, it kind of gives a little bit of oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Right, exactly.
I think a lot of people feel that if I listen to my intuition, that everything's going to be fun. It won't hurt, right? Everything. And I have a very differing view, and please, I'd love to hear the therapeutic,
Yeah.
Concept of this and how you process through that. But I do truly believe that sometimes our intuition will send us down some very thorny paths in order to learn the next thing that we have to learn in order to level up.
Right.
And when that happens and, the relationship falls apart, or we lose the job,
Right.
or we leave a good paying job to go out on our own and that business fails.
Right.
There's many different things that can happen when we listen to the intuition, and it doesn't play out the way our ego tells us it's supposed to.
Right. Right.
We feel like we've done something wrong.
Right.
We don't trust our intuition. Yet if we start looking at it like our intuition is there to help us grow.
Yes.
And sometimes that's in shadow, sometimes that's in light. But if we listen to it, and through that growth, opportunity, I think it releases some of the pressure around
absolutely.
the decision making and listening to the intuition. I went through something very similar to that the last few years, where my intuition was telling me I had a lot to learn from this person, and this person hurt me. It caused me pain, and I thought, well, then I can't trust my intuition. The thing that's kept me safe is no longer safe for me.
Right.
And it took a lot of self-work to really be like, are you sure what happened didn't happen the way it needed to happen? And I do believe it's about trusting it no matter what happens. And, good or bad. I mean, don't put yourself in harm's way.
Sure. Yeah.
But we have to go through some of these painful experiences to level up. So that's my opinion of intuition and spirituality.
Yeah. And I think you said something really specific there. You said, the intuition wasn't there to keep you safe. Right. And I think that's important to know, is that we can listen to our intuition and not particularly like what it's telling us, and trust it and move through it. The intuition is there just to tell us what we need to know, right? To tell us what is true. And sometimes what is true, we're not comfortable with, we don't like. But our intuition is there to tell us, right? The safety piece, the keeping ourselves safe, is the work we do after that, right? And so, this kind of goes from a therapeutic perspective. If our intuition is telling us something we don't like I have to leave this relationship, or I have to leave this job, or I have to end this friendship, and something that we know is going to be painful for us, that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean that we've been harmed. It just means that now we've got to utilize the skills of, say, radical acceptance. I radically accept that this is uncomfortable. This is sad. It's not the way I would have hoped it would have gone. But I also see the positives in this. I see that I'm taking steps forward. I know more about myself now. I trust myself more. I learned a lot from this person. I gained these skills from this job. So radical acceptance allows us to see and trust that this isn't right for us anymore, or it's not where we need to be, or we see the veil has been removed maybe, and still move forward with a sense of positivity and gratitude even. Radical acceptance says I don't have to stay in the negativity and feel unsafe. My safety comes in being able to move forward and move through something. That's where true safety is. And intuition, when we become a little bit more fine-tuned to it, then it is this spiritual conversation that we're having with ourselves and with other people all the time. And it'll tend to speak to us quicker, and we'll trust it quicker, which will help us in turn avoid situations that may be more painful than another situation would be. But we can't avoid pain entirely in this life. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I think so often people they go down a path that they feel intuitively drawn to, or make a decision. And even when they're in it and they've learned the lesson, or it's served its purpose, they're like, well, my intuition told me I should do this. So, and they double down. And they work harder, and you just see the hole getting deeper and deeper. Because they get their ego takes over.
That's what it is. Like, exactly.
I've made this decision, my intuition, it's like, and maybe your intuition was right, but at some point, if it's no longer serving you, you need to get still and listen to your intuition again, because what is it saying now? And I think when we see it as opposed, instead of this like one and done, right? Like I made a decision, and, when we see it as this constant relationship with this deep part of ourselves, where we check in regularly, where we listen, when we start recognizing when we're having those physical reactions or mental thought, when we learn that it's something that we always have access to.
Correct. Yeah.
And that
we're always communicating with it. Always. We just aren't fully conscious of it. Yeah.
Can you speak, if you're comfortable, anytime that you've listened to your intuition and it's paid off, or anytime you've listened to your intuition and it didn't pay off? Like, do you have any anecdotes?
Yeah. And I'll actually give you an interesting one that just kind of came to me as you were kind of talking about, like, it's this constant, kind of coming back and listening to, there was a relationship that, I, from an ego perspective, was just kind of like, this is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. This is the way it should be. This is the way it's going to be. Like, I was convincing myself. And, over a period of time, it was becoming very, clear in my intuition that it wasn't healthy. It wasn't, a good thing for me and for others around me. And, it took me a long time to trust that intuition, because it was this constant conversation of coming back to the ego, and not only just what this is how it should be, or I should be okay with this, or I should be able to do this, right? But also just the projection of other people's thoughts and feelings around that. And so, when I did honor my intuition and made the decision to end it, I remember feeling a lot of peace and calm and clarity in that. But what's interesting is post that time, I have had seasons where I've come back to question my intuition. Should I have done that? Was that the right thing? And that, again, understanding that even when we trust our intuition, again, like you said, it's not a one and done. It's not like, okay, well, I'm making this decision. I've checked in with my intuition. This is what it said. Check. I'll never have to worry about that again. You're constantly in this conversation, and the ego is constantly wanting to come back in to protect you, right? And so that was something where I had to go back to withdrawing a little bit to myself and doing the things to fine tune my intuition again, because the intuition started getting muted over a period of time that I had gotten busier, my self-care was down, I wasn't checking in with myself enough, I was allowing more projection in my life. And this decision really started weighing on me, and I started having a lot of conflict about it. And going back and withdrawing again and making my meditation and just solitude with myself a priority again, I was able to get that clear, calm confirmation that no, you did listen to your intuition. This was the right decision to make at the time. And so that just goes to show that just because you do a little bit of that work to heighten your intuition doesn't mean that whatever it is that you intuitively knew at that moment is safe from the ego again. The ego is always trying to come back in to protect us. It's doing its job, but we don't need it to do that job forever. We can allow the ego to go back to a place of security. So that was a situation where, I firmly trusted my intuition, but allowed my ego to come back in even on that one thing, but, was able to get it back in check. So
I'm glad you said that, because I've had situations where my intuition has told me that I need to part ways with someone, and in order for growth to occur.
Yeah.
And, so much of our culture tells us, keep working at it, keep working at it. And my intuition's like, no, I think I need to move away. And they're not an evil person. I'm not an evil person. There was no abuse. There was no, it just, the growth that had to occur could not occur within that space.
Sure.
The energetic space that we had at the time. And then later in life, or, it could be a year, it could be 2, it could be 10. We've come back together and it's elevated.
Yes.
And we've both grown, we've both healed. So I think it's being open to listening to the intuition at different times, even if it's telling you something completely opposite.
Right. Of what it told you before. Correct. Yes.
Exactly. And once again, we are not saying if you are in an abusive relationship, move away from that. Seek help. Reach out to someone, a trusted family member, a friend, a therapist, someone. Definitely reach out to them. But, we all go through experiences with other lovely people.
Yes.
That, our paths are, constantly ebbs and flows and crisscrossing. And so I think listening to that intuition, and the more you use it, like any muscle,
exactly,
the stronger it gets. Yeah.
And I think it would be good for our listeners or viewers to kind of hear some ways to hone in and exercise that intuitive voice. So what are some ways that you kind of practice or kind of participate in order to get that intuitive voice a little bit louder or easier to hear?
Well, for me, it's alone time. It's aloneness. It's stillness, meditation, time in nature, moving in nature. I'm an external processor, which means I have to process out loud with others. So people that I trust, I'll, I'm going to run this by you. Tell me any holes you see in this, or, I'm having a situation and process the situation with someone not involved in it. And that doesn't mean I'm gossiping. It means I'm talking about something that I'm trying to work through. So all of those are some techniques. Journaling, getting it outside of me so that I can see it on paper.
Right.
It helps me know what my intuition's trying to tell me, because once again, the ego, it wants me to be safe.
Correct. It thinks it knows. It thinks it knows what keeps you safe, right? Yes.
Exactly. And anytime that I start moving through anything that is not loving, my intuition that is, it's so lovely. Anytime it hurts me to love someone, I am doing it wrong.
Right.
I'm doing it wrong.
Yes.
And, because, and sometimes the most loving thing that I can do is to release someone, but it has to always be from a loving place.
Absolutely. Right. And anytime that hurt and harm starts coming up, when you think of this person, you really have to pull in all of the possible love you can find, like internally and around you energetically.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Yes, it's not. And, I think it's funny you said the external processing, because like that really does help you check into your intuition. And it's so funny because I was just from in a very like fundamental level, just before we recorded, I was out shopping with my kids. We're on, just having a little mini break, so to speak. And I was, at a store with my son, and he wanted this blanket, and he was trying to choose between these 2 blankets, and he liked them both so much. And I was like, okay, let's do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and wherever it lands, check in with yourself and see if that's something that lights you up or not. You know?
That's so good.
Right. And that's just a really easy way to get out of your head. Like being indecisive is you being stuck in your head. Right. And so a lot of these conversations we think we're having with our intuition, we're actually having in our head. Well, I don't know. Well, check in. You know, what does your intuition say? I don't know. I can't decide. Well, your intuition knows. It's just that you haven't tapped back in. So doing that external processing with somebody, whether it's a therapist or a friend that you can trust, that holds space, that doesn't project their own thoughts or feelings about, like, I didn't say to my son, I really like the brown one, but let's do eeny, meeny, miny, moe and see what you think, right? It was just a space of total neutrality that he would be able to then check in with himself and be like, oh, how did I feel? What is my intuition saying once it landed on this one blanket, you know? So that's, I think, a really good way that you kind of gave as a recommendation. And the other one I would say is movement. You know, being in nature, withdrawing, kind of coming back into self, but also for some people, movement, you know, walking. You know, I know I told you the story. I run on a treadmill and I stare at a really ugly garage wall that has nothing on it, really needs something on it. But it's where I just move and I'm able to sink into my body, which is where my intuition is, and allows my ego and my head to just start quieting themselves down. So especially if you can move in nature, you know, go sit by moving water. That's a great place to sit and be able to start hearing your intuition and quiet. Oftentimes we think is our intuition, but it's just our chatter, you know, in our brain. And that typically, like you said, if it hurts to love somebody, it's the same thing. If your intuition is super busy and it's saying a lot of different things, it's chatting a lot and it's indecisive, that's not your intuition. That is your ego and your head center trying to come up with a solution that they can't solve this problem. It has to come from your intuition.
I found, for me, anytime I haven't listened to my intuition, haven't taken the time and really checked in with it, I really spend a lot of time course correcting.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that for me, really taking the space and the time, even, you know, I've been trying to make a really big life decision the last couple of years.
Right.
And one of the hardest things I've done is just stay still. It does not come naturally to me.
Right. I don't like it.
I'm like a racehorse, man. You gotta open that chute, let me run.
Yes.
And but my intuition was telling me, stay still. Listen, be with yourself. This is a season of rest, a season of recuperation, recharge, you know, reconnection with myself. My ego is like, this is nonsense. I don't know what's happening here. And I've really battled it. And once I surrendered and said, I hear you, I'm listening. I calmed down. I started enjoying myself more. Things that lit me up started arriving in my life. And then the choice showed itself. And that chute's about ready to open.
Yeah, I know.
It's about ready to run.
Yes, right.
So it will come. It will arrive. You just have to listen and, you know, quiet the ego. Ask it to take a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, our intuition, just like I said, you know, kind of bring it full circle. You know, we all can tap into it. We all can cue into it. Our intuition is there to serve and speak to each one of us. Absolutely. You know, but it's also there to be available to cue in and speak to others. And I think that that's something that our ego almost always wants to keep us from doing that, because like the ego can't control what's going on with other people. But I think it's also a beautiful gift to be able to cue into sensing what other people may be feeling, or sensing what other people might need to know, right? But really do it from a very authentic place. but you have to be careful that, you've done your work to actually hear your intuition. Otherwise, you may show up in that space, really be projecting a little bit more of your ego, thinking it's intuition, and it's really not. I think as a culture, we do have these, buzzwords of self-care and of self-awareness and self-actualization, and also of psychopathology. Like, we use the term narcissistic, that person's a narcissist, that person's a narcissist. No, but they're probably not. But you're just trying to say something to how they treated you or what you've observed. We do that on the same side of like intuition. We just, oh, I'm an empath, or I'm highly intuitive. But you have to be careful to really have done the work to be able to speak to that, because the ego can mask itself very much to try to project that. And if it's not authentic, you are putting yourself in a very unsafe place internally by having conversations that you believe is part of your intuition. But until you know what your intuition really sounds like, you have to be careful. And then also projecting what you're saying is intuition, or what you're saying is sensing or feeling of others, and it's really the ego. So that is the shadow work that has to be done before you start putting this out there for other people.
Thank you for saying that, because I think so often, when we hear that someone's empathic or intuitive, we automatically think they're infallible.
Right.
And everyone is fallible. Everyone can make an error, because we all have wounding. It's all getting filtered through our own ego, our own desires, our own wishes. And I hear a lot with in relationships, well, my intuition's telling me they're the one. Sorry.
Yes.
I know there's people who believe there's the one. You can't see this on the podcast, but I use air quotes.
Your finger quotes, right?
You're seeing some of Lisa's work right now. Little ego work there.
You're like, I just want to throw that out there for you all to see and hear.
So anytime that our intuition is possessive,
yes,
telling us that there's ownership, or that someone belongs to us, or we are obligated because we've made a promise, right? Any type of these words that take away freedom for either ourselves or someone else, I do truly believe that is your ego. That is not intuition.
Yes. Yeah.
Love is not grasping. It allows for freedom. If you feel that you must move on, then please do. I will grieve because you matter to me, but I want what you want for yourself. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I think anytime that it always comes back to you. It always, you must always return to yourself, because it's the only thing that you have any say in, really.
Yes. Yes.
So absolutely. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
Yeah. And I think that, in all ways, if we're sensing something intuitively about something outside of us, communicating that or sharing that or projecting that definitely needs to be in a space where you've been invited to do that, and that you are very mindful of what that should sound like, or not what that should sound like, but what an intuitive voice sounds like when it's being shared. And as a therapist, we have to constantly be in this energetic dance, but also in this constant energetic checking of ourselves, because I am very much a solutions focused therapist, and so my clients really appreciate that I do give them action steps, that I do speak with a lot of authority in sharing things to them, meaning that I'm, when I sense something and I'm sharing it with them, it's because I've sat with it and processed with it. But I always, I always preface it with, I'm sensing not you need to, or you have been, I very much am mindful that they have invited me, even in being that therapeutic relationship, and that in this conversation they are looking for some feedback from myself, but that even when I'm sharing it, I too am a human, and although I'm constantly checking for that counter transference, I'm also saying this is my sensing. That doesn't mean that you have to own it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the phrasing I use is, if this resonates with you,
right,
take it, and if it
exactly.
doesn't, just leave it. It is the mine is not in a therapeutic field.
Sure, yeah.
So, but it, when I'm speaking to a friend, if this resonates with you,
yes,
then receive it, and if not, let it go. Yeah. So, and
I tell a lot of my therapists underneath me that are in supervision, your counter transference, anything that you're sensing that you feel like needs to be shared, if it's, if you share it or you don't share it and something is stirring up inside of you, there's something on the other side of that. That's your intuition also saying, hey, go a step over that. There's a little nugget, there's a little treasure on the other side of that. So even if you share something with somebody and they're like, I don't know if that's really it, then bring it back to self, and don't start speaking shame and being like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Just be like, what is it on the other side of that I really do need to see? And there, in a therapeutic relationship, that's for our client, but in friendships, in our relationships, there's something on the other side of that we don't necessarily have to share with the other person. It's just something that we can be aware of and be like, oh, you know what? That was something of my own stuff there that I was trying to put out there that felt familiar to me. And so I want to look at that a little bit deeper. So just because your intuition is sensing something and you share it in a safe, inviting place, but it doesn't resonate with the other person, doesn't mean anything about yourself. There's no ego that needs to come back there if you're doing it authentically. It's just what's on the other side of that I might need to look at.
I love that, because it means that, it doesn't invalidate it. It just means it wasn't meant for them. And I love how you just described that, because you see this dance of intuition with others. And I think so often we're like, it's my intuition. It's mine.
Yeah.
My intuition. Right. And, it's like, this one thing, this is mine, and, and you can't have access to it. It's only for me, but it's not. It's this beautiful dance that you do with those around you, and moving with them. And, my intuition, as I'm sure everyone else's does, like, it leads me to the books I need to read.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It leads me to the podcasts I need to hear, or the friendships that I'm going to learn from, or the lessons I'm going to gain from others. So why wouldn't their intuition be doing the same?
Absolutely. Yeah. And the way I love to kind of picture, I picture it almost like when your intuition, when you get to a place where you are energetically available to tap in and sense from an intuitive place, your energy taps into somebody else's energy, or the energy of an idea, or of a book, or of a situation, or an opportunity. Hello, manifesting. And all of a sudden you have this like open channel of kind of energy kind of going back and forth. It literally is a channel where you're sensing and they are sensing, or the opportunity is sensing you. And all of a sudden you have this channel that's open, and it's moving, and it's flowing. And it is not a Cristine or Lisa intuition that is penetrating something.
Exactly.
No, it is.
Well, that was graphic.
I know, right? And if you saw it, I was definitely going for it. I didn't feel invited, and that wasn't appropriate.
That's so true. And I think so often we think, okay, my intuition is telling me, and we'll use a relationship, because that's where we use it a lot, right? My intuition is telling me, to, date this person, to go out with this person. And then it turns like, we think, well, there was no spark. So why did my intuition? But maybe this is going to be an amazing friend, or maybe they had that little nugget of wisdom
Correct.
to offer you. I actually went out on a date with one guy, and the whole time, like, I ended up kind of giving him, guidance, and he's talking to me about his ex. And I was like, oh, this is not
right. Yeah.
And he's like asking me all these questions. And I was like, okay, it was lovely to meet you. Man, I can't remember your name now. But that was the whole point of going
yes
on that date. I don't know what became of him, but maybe it gave him some clarity that he needed.
100%. Yeah. Our intuition, it's ready to speak to us in all kinds of things, like which blanket to pick. Exactly. Or, like, is this somebody that like I should continue talking to? Is this a relationship I should continue? Right. So, and that's what I love about our intuition. It's like this constant conversation, just trying to like love us and speak truth to us and call us back to true self. And it's just, but where the ego will sit there and chat and like yell, and it's like, it's the dude with the face paint at the football game, like, that's like, just it's like in your face. The intuition is like, hey friend, like come over, sit down, let's chat. How are you? Right. And it's a way that's trying to attend and tune into us in a really authentic way, and not in a way that is afraid and trying to protect us from any kind of change, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. I love that gentleness of it, because the intuition is gentle, and it's not going to scream in your face, right? It's going to talk very quietly, and it does require you to be quiet,
absolutely,
quiet the mind, to be still, get gentle with yourself, and you will hear it. It will show up, and when you do, you will not need to defend your choices, and people will ask you to. Well, how do you know? Well, I know.
I just know. That's what the intuition says. It's like, meh, I just know.
Yeah.
And you're not available to have any more conversations outside of that.
Yeah. I'll send you a postcard.
Right. My intuition will send you a postcard.
Okay. Oh, I love this conversation, and I'm sure we're going to have more of these around intuition and our instinct. If anyone is interested in coming on and being a guest on the Ego Project to talk about intuition and anything else ego related, how you've navigated yours, and in growth and healing, we would love to hear from you. You have anything to add, Cristine?
No, it's, we're recording this right before Thanksgiving. If we get it out before then, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. If it's after, hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and is looking forward to a wonderful holiday season.
Oh, so good. We have a couple of more season 1 podcasts
we do,
and video casts coming out, and then we're heading into season 2. And season 2, we are chock full of guests. We are lined up through 2023, which is so exciting. Cannot wait to have these conversations and learn from these people. Make sure to like and subscribe. Please share. More people that hear about us, then they could come and be a guest. And that means more ego healing, which makes the world a brighter and better place.
Yes. And actually, if you're sitting there saying, oh, that would be so fun to be on that, but nobody wants to hear what I have to say, that is your ego. Yes. And that means you need to reach out.
And we want to hear, because we're very curious people.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we did, some of our guests, we had Galen Wood on our last, talking about aging, which was amazing. We've had Sarah Verba, who is an amazing empath. We've had Reese Torval Hansen, whose name I always butcher. And they were talking about gender identity. And who have I forgotten? Please don't let me forget anyone. It's going to come to us. Jenna. Jenna Young, who is amazing. And she spoke about leadership. So we'll put all those links in the description box so you can check them out. And Cristine, as always,
I know.
Keep shining your bright light, huh?
You too, Lisa. My little pepper to my salt.
For 2 years old. Okay. So good. I just see some products coming out. Okay. All right. All right. I will talk to you soon. See you next time, Cristine.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.